Good evening, everyone. What a gorgeous autumn evening here in Maine. I'm Sharon Corwin, the Carolyn Mussey Director and Chief Curator at the Colby College Museum of Art. And it's my great pleasure to welcome faculty, staff, students, many of our community members to the annual Miles and Katharine Prentice Distinguished Lecture given this evening by Leonardo Drew. I'm especially pleased to have members of our Board of Governors with us this evening, and I extend my warmest welcome to you all. I would also like to acknowledge our partners and co-sponsors for this evening's event, Colby's Art Department and the Center for Arts and Humanities. It is a tremendous honor for me to introduce and welcome Leonardo Drew to Colby. I have long been a huge fan of his work. His recent solo show at Sycamore Jenkins in New York City was an extraordinary tour de force. We are also enormously privileged to have on view in the museum's Gordon Gallery Drew's incredible work Untitled 104 from 2005, which has become a visitor favorite and has been a subject of engagement in many of our academic programs. Drew attended Parsons School of Design and earned his BFA from Cooper Union. He has received numerous prestigious awards and residencies, including a Joan Mitchell Foundation grant and artist residencies at the Studio Museum in Harlem and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, which he held in 1998. And it's great to have you back in Central Maine, Leonardo. Over the past 25 years, Drew's work has been shown in exhibitions at the Bronx Museum of the Arts, the Cordova Museum and Sculpture Park, the St. Louis Art Museum, and the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, to name just a few. His art is also held in collections throughout the world, including the Guggenheim, the Met, the Tate, and the Brooklyn Museum. At the center of Drew's art is an interest in materiality. He creates sculptures out of what he calls brand new stuff: wood, metal, fabric, plastic, paper, which he then subjects to weathering effects and decay in his studio. By transforming his materials through burning, oxidizing, and casting, he challenges our understanding of the inherent nature of these elements and what they can be made to represent. And while he works in a formal language of abstraction, Drew creates his own distinct idiom of material and form. Scale is also a key element in Drew's work. His sculptures expand to a monumental degree, sometimes taking over entire gallery walls or entire rooms. Yet, as you will see if you spend time with the great work hanging in Colby's museum, intimacy and detail are also equally relevant in his art. Drew takes the minimalist grid and disrupts it by introducing elements of irregularity, distortion, and disintegration. The artist Agnes Martin might initially seem like an unlikely comparison, but Martin and Drew's exhibitions this fall in New York, one could see the attention and value that each artist gives to the qualities of imperfection. These are readily apparent in both artist practices, even when executed through wildly different means. Drew's art embraces ambiguity, refusing to settle easily into a single meaning or interpretation. Instead, it operates between the dialectical realms of strength and fragility, order and chaos, permanence and entropy, certainty and indeterminacy. He often finds a way to show us the generative possibilities of beauty and ruin, giving us a powerful metaphor for these times. We are enormously honored to have Leonardo Drew with us this evening to speak about his work, and I know we're in for a real treat. So please join me in welcoming Leonardo Drew to Colby.
Well done, well done. Now I'm going to take it apart. Oh boy, okay. Let's get organized, let's see. Try to remember how this works. There we go. You know, it's funny, when I look at this image, it's the first time I've actually shown this image during a lecture. So my assistant said, you have to have this in there. So of course, it's like, I'm looking at it, it's like, why did I have to have this in there? But actually, it does. It's my history. It's long. I mean, like I'm 13 here, and this is my first exhibition, and like it was all over the newspapers, believe it or not. But like this kid in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I remember the photographer who took this photo was just cracking up, and he was just like he's this hippie dude, and he's like this is like this image of this kid with buttons missing on his coat, and he's painting Captain America, So his political statement was like right there, It's like, oh, it's like I was wondering why he was laughing at me, It's like makes perfect sense now, So and, I mean, this not only this image, but actually the kind of things that happened at that time. I mean, at 13, showing this type of work, and it was also the kind of works that I was looking at and considered it art. I mean, it was not only the comic book stuff. It was like I was making copies of Norman Rockwell paintings and Maxwell Parrish, and if you can imagine that. But it was like facility was off the chain. But it's like this. Like from 13 until I was, I think, like college, first year college, I was exhibiting. And you could see the growth, though I'm sure, and I should do a better slide presentation, that there's a whole period that skipped because we start there and we end up where? Here. Well, yeah, that's about right. I mean, it's painting, right? It's sort of like Maxwell Parrish. And it's like definitely influenced by what I was seeing. So we can look at we just look at facility here, and it's like at this time I might have been maybe like 16. This is what I was exhibiting then, and even then I was approached by folks from Marvel Comics and DC Comics and Heavy Metal magazine, and they're just like, whoa, we got to get this guy to, and they brought me out to visit them in the in New York, they had these called bullpens, and it's like they got all these artists working, and I said, this looks too much like slave shacks. I said, I don't want any part of this. And plus, I had already seen Jackson Pollock's work, So it was like, okay, it's like, this is not, what I was doing was not art. It's like surface stuff, And it's like facility, and it was the prettified surface. So I was like determined to sort of like, what? If it's not this, like facility, it's not this prettified surface, then what is beyond that? What's beyond that surface? So I went on this kind of like exploration to sort of realize that other dimension. And this is the beginnings of that. I started, like I said, okay, from now on, you're not going to be doing any more painting, no more drawing, and you're going to tie your hands, and you're going to have to figure out another way. And this is the very beginnings of that. I mean, it's like this is this shaped black paper. That's, and I think we may have other samples of it, yep. These are like the very first works that I created, and you can tell, like, you look at the resolution on these, it's like these are dirty slides, but it's like, but it gives you an idea anyway of like, okay, what I was sort of feeling was pulling far enough away from what I was familiar with. And like, from that to this was also like this kind of crazy leap because it was like maybe here I just finished school. That meaning like Cooper Union. And this is living in your apartment, trying to figure it out. And like, and I remember a friend came in and he said, how you gonna get it out of here, I had never thought about that. It was all about just creating. You create art, and it's like showing it or whatever. I wasn't thinking about anything like that. It was like, okay, I got all this, like these, I think you almost see a skull in there, like here. It's like a deer skull. And I remember we were going up to a place called Heather Hills, which is just outside of the Hamptons, way out there, where hunters go. And we were digging animals out of the quicksand and bringing them back to the studio and like trying to sort of figure out, okay, if I was going to sort of realize the other dimension, I kind of felt I had to get past, my fears of the unknown, death. So it's like if you play with dead things, then in some way, you're challenging or at least physically touching death. I mean, these things are no longer here. So I felt like, okay, if you work this some way into your new self, then, something else is on the other side. I didn't know what was going to be on the other side of this. But I said it was the most important thing at that moment to sort of like at least answer that question. Yeah, you definitely can see the skeletons there. Yeah. But I mean, what was bringing out was actually it takes a long time to find your voice. And I think that to know your beginnings, why you took this route in order to sort of realize this otherness, that unexplained thing, your voice. How do you realize these things? It's like you have to kind of lose things in order to gain things. And I think here, I mean, you can always kind of almost, if you look at that and you go backwards, and you like these shaped things, they're hinting at these more sculpted shapes. This was still in my apartment in Washington Heights. At that time, I was sleeping in a bathtub because there was no place else. Sort of and it was like 7 years of that, And I remember it's funny when I think about it. I say I didn't have a telephone for 7 years. I had a girlfriend for 7 years, Everything was 7, but it was all at that time, you know what I mean? So it's like, those are the dark ages, So it's like, but looking at these monstrosities, it's like, wow, they're leading up to something. But all those works were taken apart to realize this monstrosity, which actually is, I guess we would call the mother piece to all of my works, number 8. And I was just like, if you could say that's number 8, that means what became of 1 to 7, right? So it's like, okay, 1 to 7, 1 to 8, it's like, okay, that became number 8. So that really was the jump-off point for me in terms of, okay, what you create, and then on top of that, your materials, have a life. And but they also regenerate. There's birth, life, death, and regeneration. These are the things that I kind of learned on my journey to get to this point. And working and creating number 8, absolutely, these things were answered. And it's like it was the breakthrough monstrosity, and it's definitely it's like the piece that influences still all of the works that I do now. Even if there is no dead animals or things like that in the works that I do now, but they absolutely echo that still. You see the things in there. It's like, wow, Surprisingly enough, it never sold. I own this piece. but we're talking, 1980, 88 when it was created? Exhibited in 1989. And I remember friends, it's like we had Julian Schnabel, Basquiat, Keith Haring. This was the kind of arts that were happening at the time when I was creating this. And I had a friend, Robert Longer was a friend. He said, you got to come out. You got to show this stuff. It's great stuff. And it's like, I said, yo, you crazy? It's like, I said, no one's going to accept this. It's like, and I knew, because the kind of work that was happening at that time was magnificent, but this was, even when I did decide to show it, it was in question whether or not it was art. Now you see this work nonstop out there. It's like, okay, but it's like it's the floodgates are open. So as I move forward, I still was asking that question. Even starting with this, decayed matter here from organic to, non-organic matter. This is rust. And I would call this the second most important piece that I've created. And and if we move forward, you'll begin to sort of see how the merging of at least these two ideas come together to create probably what we'll call the very top piece in my old. These are works actually from an exhibition back in 1992, which I would say probably is the one that people still talk about, that exhibition, because of the material. This piece actually is it's traveling in the 30 American show. And that's a whole other story. But this is like a cotton wall. I mean, all the works in a lot of ways seems like they were like in that exhibition. All these are from that exhibition, these works. They had something to do with that material. I've never visited that material again, but surprisingly enough, when people wrote about me anytime thereafter, they just kept talking about cotton, 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 to this point where it's like, okay, get Leonardo to come out during the 30 American show and talk about this piece. And I'm like, hell no, I'm not interested in that. It's like, it's like, okay, it was an exorcism. I think that as an artist, you sort of like, if you're really working material and you're really working to sort of like move into different dimensions and add to the language, I'm not interested in parking it. The very idea that I could have, yes, you could have parked it here, and it could be like the cotton dude, you know what I mean? The Richard Serra of cotton, So it's like, I'm not, It's ridiculous, right? It's like I can say that, it's ridiculous, but people do these things, and it's fine. I mean, you can park it if you like, but I'm not interested in that. Life's just too short. So, it's like I talk a lot. I'm sorry. But yeah, these are all from that period. I can only say, nice images. But these are this will give you an indication of like what I mean when I take something apart. This piece and this piece became this piece. Okay, in this piece there were like maybe 1,200 boxes that I created, and this piece, obviously you can see all each one of these are also created. You can almost see how they were made. It's like blackened paper that's been taped together with like canvas and holding it together. And there's feathers here and there, but whatever. But but the gist of all this is this, that. It's funny, whenever I look at this image in particular, how I ended up getting that canvas to do that, it almost is like a literally. But I cooked them actually on a stove, and they weren't burned, they were actually steamed in order to sort of realize this sort of effect. Very effective, but actually almost got me arrested because the steaming and all that, and the smoke coming out of the window, So the fire department came, and it's like, I didn't think they were coming for me. It was like, I looked outside, they were coming, but it was like, okay, there's a fire someplace. And what they saw from the ground was like, I'm screaming for help, and there's smoke coming out, And so and I was looking out the window, and they were pointing up. And I remember they're like, they started taking the door off the hinges. Like he could hear it, It's like, that's how they come in. They don't ring your doorbell. They take the door off the hinges. And I was like, oh, this is, and I went to the door and it was like, who is it? It's like, art, I'll tell you, honestly, art is interesting that way because it takes you in these kind of strange kind of like situations. And art also gets you out of these situations. It's like, okay, because when they came in and they like were on their walkie-talkies going like, oh, I keep saying burning up stuff or whatever, doing whatever. And it's like, oh, he has a burnt mattress in here. And it's like, and they were trying to figure it all out, but they weren't asking me, they were asking each other, what's going on here? So it's like, and all you have to say is I'm an artist. And it's like, it's all good. It's all good. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like, and they left just like that. It was like, and like, I mean, this piece here was the same situation. Surprisingly, they are one after the other. It's like this one I created in Florida, and I was out like in my grandmother's yard. It was one of those. I did this visit, and it was like, okay, I need to take something that I actually could create, in her yard. And so there was like this big pool that I created in her yard, and she allowed me to do this. And it was like this, I'm sitting in the middle of this black pool because it's really like this black paint that I'm painting these boxes, and her neighbors were coming around. They were going like, oh, it's like, he's crazy, So this is, it's like, you say, oh, no, I'm an artist. And they say, oh. So this is just the gospel truth. This just gets you, if you want to get out of getting a ticket, you could do that. Say you're an artist. Yeah. But this piece actually is created from those works. And obviously it's this one, which is number 43. And by the way, they're never untitled. You were saying you were untitled, and then no, it's number. That is the title. It's number. Yeah. So you have number 104. Yeah. So this is number 43, and it's actually the most. I would say it's the peak moment at that time because it was a coming together of these two works. Let's go backwards. This one. And you can see it in this one. It's obvious only if I show it to you, but it's like, okay, here's a rusting, and here's organic matter. And so what I started doing was literally becoming the weather in order to realize things. So I took all these boxes from this piece. That's another thing. It's like if I get pieces, in my hands, I mean, it's like there's no such thing as finished. Works are, they're layered like the Grand Canyon, It's like there's a life, in each of those strata of rock, there's life. So I respect that. It's like I don't make things precious. It's like, okay, you know what? There's something else going on here. So the gallery does this a lot. They sort of will say, oh, well, this piece sold or whatever. I say, well, where is it? It's in the studio. Well, it's mine. It's not, just because someone decided that they need to own it doesn't necessarily mean that, you can make a decision as an artist whether or not, you can say, okay, money is the thing and I need to sell this, or you can say there's another step here. And I mean, for me, it's that next step. So it's like I need to have the work. I would love to have the work back. Yeah. Variations on a theme, pretty much. I mean, these rusted works. Yeah. Always interesting looking, when I say okay, you can park it. I mean, people talk about this all the time because there's a book called Existed that documents 25 years of my making art. So you can see almost all these works in that book. But the point is that in that book you can kind of see the different types of materials. You can park it anywhere. So if I wasn't a cotton dude, I could have been the rust dude. So it's like, it's nonstop. It's like, or the dead animal dude. So it's like, this is a piece actually I did that's a larger version of this number 8 without the dead animal parts. And it was a collaboration with Merce Cunningham. And and interesting, I got that phone call from him, and he was wondering if I was be interested in working with him. And I was like, what? I mean, it is, this art journey is something else, I tell you, because you could, just by fate, it's like things land or whatever. It's like, you're being brought in by these others who are kind of like, I want to work with him. And you're like, I'll do that. work Merce Cunningham, no problem, Yeah, this piece is called Ground Level Overlay. Moved around a lot. I saw it for the first time at City Center and then at Lincoln Center. But I know it's been in places where I've never been, Korea, and just bouncing around. You can't, he has an interest, or had an interesting way of working, which similar to the way I work, and also similar to the way filmmaker Terrence Malick works, and also Stanley Kubrick. Merce, actually, what he would do was he would select an artist would do his thing, Merce would do the phrasing, the musician would do his thing, all separate from one another. They wouldn't even come together to sort of discuss anything. No, boom, those elements come together right around opening night for the first time. And I said, Merce, what if it doesn't work? He said, sometimes it's crap, and sometimes it works, So it's like those are the chances you take. And I respect that, It's like, okay, we're making serious art here, you know what I mean? But you got to know, he was so sure of his vision that, it's like, it's like selecting colors. He selected me, I was a color, you know what I mean? And like the musician was also a color. So it's like he already made these decisions, and kind of like, even though he didn't know I was going to make this, create this, probably the tonal range or the frequency of where, he called it ground level overlay, didn't even know the piece, so it's like, okay, it's like when I saw it, I say, yes, that's ground level overlay, whatever that means, that's what. Always a lot of fun, though. Boy, this monstrosity, yeah, this was actually had its beginnings, and it's shown at the Hirshhorn, but I created it from bits and pieces from all my travels, mostly from a trip in Brazil. Wow, that was a crazy trip. I mean, like, as in. It was my first, you can almost look at it, it's the first time I've actually used actual objects. Now, if we were to go backwards, you might have thought that the works that I created before this were found objects. They were not found objects. I created those in the studio. So I become the weather, and it's like, yes, I didn't make these. These are actually found objects. And so when I was in actually Salvador Bahia, Brazil, I was asked to do the Quiet in the Land project. And it was like, well, what is that exactly? And they said, well, you're going to be working with like these street kids, and the idea is to bring them in to work with a select group of international artists. And like it was just to sort of introduce them to like life again, and actually get them into sort of like really realizing their worth. And I said, that's a noble cause. I want to do that. So there I was in Brazil, and they had us staying in like a 2-story penthouse, and street kids, working with street kids. And I was like, I'm not doing this. So I had packed my bags. I was ready to go. And they said, how can we keep you here, Leonardo? It was like, now, I was the first artist. There was like other artists who were coming in after me, like 13 altogether. It was like Mona Hatoum, Janina Tony, Neri Ward. I mean, like, I was like a whole bunch of us. But I was the first. I was a big mistake, because I wouldn't exactly say I'm problematic. It's just that there are certain things you can introduce to me, and I'm going to say yes or no, and there'd be an extreme yes or no. So when they said like street kids, and like they didn't tell me that until I got there. So I was like, I'm leaving, And so they said, well, what if we put you in the favelas? Took you out of here. I said, okay, this is crazy. But it's like, okay, I got to do it because I put my foot in my mouth. So I get to stay in the favelas. And we're talking, my idea of collecting or whatever, from outdoors or whatever, the stuff that we had here in America, like, that was considered garbage would be considered gold there. I mean, because when I took on 250 kids, gave them 250 garbage bags, and told them, go out and get whatever. So I was ready to take on whatever they're going to bring in. We're going to take it and sew it into this huge fishing net. And like, and they were bringing in all kinds of stuff. It actually looked like number 8, because there's a lot of dead stuff in there. And like, we just, like I said, it's great, put it in there, put it in the net, And of course, the people who were running they said, this is garbage. You came here, and it's like, the kids are from garbage, It's like, and you now are putting them right back in the garbage. You're not an artist, And they took this huge book with Michelangelo, and they said, this is art, and this is garbage. And I said, I'm not interested in having this conversation, I just told them straight up that art is alive. It's like, it's not this kind of stagnant thing. I mean, it's like, I was the first artist, remember. So artists that came in thereafter were able to sort of like, to get them to realize that, in the end, that this art it's multifaceted. It's like, it's alive, it shifts. So it's like, but me being the first one, it was just all the problems. There's nothing but problems. So of course they wrote me out of town on the rail. So I was like, okay, it's like, this is interesting. Trippett introduced me to color. And from that point on, and even now, I'm actually on my way to China next week for a month to study color, because it's still the thing that bedevils me. But like, you can see here where I actually abandoned that whole idea altogether. But what I took from this was not, color is still in my mind now, but the objects was what got me here. This is a piece I did with the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia, and the idea was to create things that were made of paper, so having the lightness being of that material was important to me. This was a failure for me, and I told them, this is not what I was looking for, but it's cute, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is plaster. It's not paper, it's plaster. Because if it was in a museum, what your visuals will say this is plaster. And most people even thought that the objects were in there, but there's nothing in those. It's like they're almost, the idea was they were supposed to be ghost-like, have the lightness being of the material, paper. So I had to take, actually, this piece became this piece. And and it was just just some sheer idea that I could actually take this thing and turn it into light by actually bringing glass into it. And so I just took all those objects and crushed them and pushed them into these vitrines. This is in some museum in Spain. I can't remember where, but it's how I actually try to remedy a failure. So, and this is where success started happening, but it took 3 years of just studying the material more. The piece that you guys have here, number 104, is one of the few pieces that made it out of the studio from that period. So you can see these objects. Now, that's paper. I mean, does that look like paper to you guys? It's paper. If you're standing in front of it, yes, your eyes traveled through it. It's light, but it's actually, and that's another thing. The whole idea of actually working with white paper was to challenge this thing that I had been using like rust and like black as a part of the emotional weight. And even if I wasn't necessarily aware of it, it became my palette, or my colors was rust and black. So I said, okay, what if I took that away? In the same way that I took drawing and painting away earlier on. So this is my sort of the other side of that experiment. And what I did learn is that, you can't hide from yourself. It's like this stuff still was emotionally weighty, even without the color. That very same piece we saw back in '92, now in Siena, and it's ceilings is what it's all about here. Yeah. 123. This piece actually is one of my favorite works. Another time when I could have probably parked it, because this piece actually has all of these sort of remnant parts, literally almost making sort of like hieroglyphics of like my whole language, and so it's like all these like different stops. Here's it permanently installed in Houston, Texas, in the Mickey Leland building on a glass wall. So if you guys are there in Houston, Texas, you're welcome to go to see it. Black came back. I like that one, though. Black again. This one is in Portland Museum. What's that? What's the museum, honey? Yeah. It's the Portland Museum? Okay, yeah. White without the paper. Yeah. It's always interesting to do these presentations because I never have the opportunity to really go backwards. I have to do that in my head and in the studio. So looking at some of these works, it's like, wow, it's like I should try that again, or try something like that, or, in effect, rip myself off, It's a lot of slides, huh? This is just a black version of 123, more manageable. Yeah. The wall tree, yeah. Trees come up a lot in my work. I mean, like I say trees, you guys probably wouldn't see trees in that, but I make these monstrosities, and it just like, it's like I visit different locations all over the world. I was just, visiting the Nazca lines in Peru. Cusco, and it was like your body takes in all this information, right? Through your pores, all over your body, you're a receiver of information. So as an artist, in the end, you don't necessarily have to call on those experiences, say, I'm going to go to the studio, I'm going to make work about this situation or that situation. It's just going to come out. If you're working all the time and actually, it's the information's going in, it has to find its way out. If I was a writer, I would be writing about it, If I was a poet, they would all flow in that way. If I was a musician, I'm a visual artist, so it's like, okay, so I go to the Redwood Forest, or I go to the Great Wall, and in the end, it's coming out. I don't necessarily have to say, like, okay, I was in the Gory Islands and saw the catacombs. That's what number 43 is about. That's not necessary. It's like that whole journey is about all of us. It's about all of us. So it's like, if I put it out there, you're going to find it. You're going to find out, you're going to feel the energy of that. It's like, and it's going to become you. It's not just my journey, it's all of our journey. So like as I'm creating these things, so that's why I number the works. It's like if I told you what the works were about, you would park it right there, and say, that's what it's about. I'm going to feel that. It's like, that'd be too easy. So it's like, okay, you know what? Let's just make the work, and you hold up a mirror, and you say, like, okay, find yourself. You're in there. Let's see, am I going too fast? Okay, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Okay. What's that? Say something. I mean, listen, just say it. Say, slow down. Okay, because I'm just like, someone told me there's food after this. I'm like trying to get at it. So just say, slow down there now. Slow down. Yeah. Okay. Is this okay now? Pace good now? Okay. Yeah, this is one of my favorite monstrosities. It's like just, this is that same piece actually from another angle. So, how big is that? As tall as me, which is probably just like about 6 feet-ish, something like in there. And like, I remember, honestly, I tell you, creating these things, like, okay, I could use a pointer now. There you go. This section, this was one piece, that one's one piece. The tongue, this part, it was not even a consideration. It was like I had these things sitting in the studio, and I said, you know what? There's something else that they need. So I pushed them together, and they became, like this piece. And it's like, and the detail of it tells you the whole story. Meaning, even in microcosm, there's a world. There are worlds within worlds, right? So I know that the information, the energies that I put in when I'm doing this, like that, and when I'm doing sweeps, it's orchestrated to bring you in. Now, I know this because it's a dance, it's life's dance, so I know that as I'm creating, it's like I'm a good dancer. So it's like, might be a great dancer. So it's all about rhythms, So it's like, okay, these things were not, they were like almost like half steps. These are half steps, right? And bringing this in, look at that thing, look at that. It's like, it just kills it. It just brings it where it needs to be. But before that, there was an absolute failure. It was like, you need something else. So it's like, okay, then you got to like complete the dance. So it's like, call it the tongue, Yeah, but it definitely has brought on a whole other body of work, that tongue area, that there are these waves that I don't even think we have any of those slides in here. I'm sorry to say, but you can find them because they are all over the place now, these waves that I've created. When I say waves, this thingy, that thing, yeah. But there are pieces that are whole monsters that are just about that. And this gives you a detail of that very same piece. Worlds within worlds, right? Yeah. This piece actually just this little maquettes of where I've been. You've seen that one, right? That one, that one, that's number 43. Hanging bags. Yeah, you got all kinds of there's a cotton wall right there. So this is, this was a lot of fun. I recently visited this piece. It's at the Denver Art Museum, and I said, "What is this about?" Like there, I said, "What was I thinking about when I did those things?" It's funny. These things stay in the studio sometimes 2-3 years. You're working on them. You're turning them upside down. Now I work on 7 things at a time, so there's never this kind of you're wiping yourself out working on just one thing. That's just be a waste of time. So 7 things, like 7 crying babies. The one calls you over here, you go over there and you treat that one, you give this one a bottle. So it's like you're bouncing from one to the other. And in the end, you end up like they just start walking. You know what I mean? They walk right out the door. So, and then you go visit them. You visit them at these places and they tell you all the things that you didn't know. It's, I don't have kids, but I can guess that, you guys who do have children, you kind of like, you have a whole bunch of them, and they're all running around making all this noise, and then they go out and become the president. It's like, what the hell? And you want to take credit for it, but The truth is, these things, they see things, they touch things, they're layered, all these things make this person. They also make art, these experiences. So I don't really even want to attempt to take credit because I know that all the things that I touched, felt, whatever, who said what to me at certain times have been a part of creating these things. So it definitely gives me some distance to have that as a philosophy because then I can actually, in the end, get on with it, you just want to have the opportunity to sort of get on with it, So it's like, okay, the next thing. So if you have 7 crying babies, they have 7 kids, it's like as soon as they leave the house, it's like, they go off to go to college and they go off to do their thing, and it's like, and you're almost amazed. It's like, wow, where did that come from? And how did I, So it's like that's the truth of life. So I'd say, like, I bow to that, Yeah, another. That was crazy. 109 feet long of just, yeah. After this, actually, after this piece, this was one that broke me. I mean, as in, I was like, okay, there's another way, It's and I'm talking about studio practice. I mean, I'm an in-studio artist. I would say probably pretty much up to this point. This is the piece that kind of like was like, you know what? You have to get out and you have to start taking in more information, Your body needs to be replenished. I was wiped out, I just like, so it's like, go out and get stuff. And this is when I started traveling and then went to Peru and like the redwood forest and just like touch things, And like, I wasn't asking anything from these places. I just was like, okay, you're the receiver of this information. It's going to flow through you. Just go there and then have the experience, and then like, you get back to the studio, whatever comes out. So that's what that was about. Oh, okay. This is me pushing a bale of cotton down the street, and this is Broadway. Now you can see the period. Look at those cars. So it's like this is 1992-ish, because the show is from that very same show in 1992. This is the cotton wall piece. It's like this. I got the cotton from one place to the other. It's on a dolly, and I pushed it from 26th Street to past Canal Street, which is Lisbonard, which is like Jack Whitten's studio. I was borrowing his studio at the time to create this monstrosity. And like it was like, that's like 30, almost like, if you count it all, it's like 30-something blocks. So, what's that? This was a random guy that was on the roof. Now, I was doing this enough times, meaning like this is, so he had time, to figure that this guy is coming, you know what I mean? It's like, so it's like, but it's a statement. Interesting enough, the very kind of statements that are being made now, I mean, like through, just art politics, I say absolutely necessary statements, but, this is in 1992. So it's like interesting to sort of look back at these images and say like, wow, it's like, I was just trying to get the cotton from one place to the other. So, but the photos say totally something different, you know what I mean? And the clothing. Now, my clothing there was my studio clothes are usually like tatters, you know? So there's a book that I'm working on right now. It's not a curated book. It's not written by scholars. It's just me writing. And writing actually is it's like a cookbook. So it's images like this, you know, it goes from start to finish. So it's a book for geeks and artists, you know. So so I'm not going to say that it's for everybody, but but if you like those kind of images, you're going to like the book, because there's all kinds of stuff in there. Studio and me creating things in the studio. There was actually a photographer that came from Japan that lived with me for 3 months, invisible in the studio, and was able to capture a lot of things. And those very images are going to be things that will drive this book, along with some other images of, you know, from start to finish photography. So this one was just like a random thing, and the guy gave me the photo and was going on about like, oh, you're this and I said, no, I'm just trying to get the cotton, you know. But but this is actually one of the shots from Akiko Ikeda. So just to give you an idea of she was there, she was present. I'm sorry, she was invisible, but she was there to do serious work. And I think that they say we call it the decisive moment, Andre Cartier-Bresson. So she was definitely getting that. More of the very same. And yeah, I'm not really depressed. It looks different. You know, this will be the cover of the book, but it's but it says a lot, doesn't it? But it's boy, let me look at that thing. Yeah, there's a wall tree there, right there, right? There's that big black thing that kid was standing in. This is that. Tight quarters. Yeah. But yeah, but working 24/7. Yeah. I love the work. Yeah. Not going to say it's successful all the time, but that's not what it's about anyway. And that's it. Thank you. I should tell you guys, there are mics here and there, and they want you to walk over to them because they're going to get you on film. If you have questions. Yeah. Any questions? We just walk to the mic. That's what they told me. I don't know what. That sounds very interesting. I like to see this.
This is a simple question, but it may have a complex answer. I'm hoping for a complex answer. What on earth are you using to construct these so they do not fall apart?
Depends. Depends on the weight of the parts. It could be a lot of screwing if it's like wood, screwing and metal plates. But there's also I'm like the poster boy for Golden's matte medium. I've soaked things for months, and sometimes even for a year, underwater, and it doesn't let go. That's that. They gave me like a 40% discount, so. I love them, you know, but they make great products, Goldens, right? Yeah, but using that as a binder for number 43, those boxes are bound that way, and they're great. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think of any other. That would be it. It's it's not that complicated. My works look complicated, but actually, I created them, and with this in mind, that I should be able to put up a piece alone without any help. That had been going on for almost 40-something years until recently, you know. I got helpers, and I don't. Let's put it this way: I don't create 1,200 boxes. I'm not chopping on a table saw, making all those boxes and things like that. You actually create, and then I go in and make my work. You know, they make the canvas. They set up the canvas for me. You know, before I was doing the canvas and everything, and felt that that was the whole, that was, I'm not trying to do that. It's just not enough. I wish there was 30 hours in a day, but it's like you want to be able to get at it, so it's like, okay. So I've learned from other artist friends, like, okay, maybe you might want to consider. But there's also this grid that, like you were going on about, like Agnes Martin, and that comes up a lot about the grid. But I should tell you that whole story about, the guy asked me how you going to get it out of here. You get to the grid real quick. You know what I mean? If you want to get things out of your place, the grid is great, Yeah. And you can hang, by yourself. I can pick something up that's that big. That can become super gigantic, It's, the grid is amazing. You keep expanding it, right? And all you have to do is know the numbers. So when I'm no longer here, when I croak, it's like you'll be able to put my work up, no problem. It just looks complicated, but it's not complicated. Mm-hmm.
Everything looks very neat in a museum. How do the museums rebuild their walls to support all the weight?
If museums are smart, they have plywood behind their walls so that you can screw. Like I actually made the mistake of doing that the first time in my studio, having walls that did not have that. And you got to watch how quickly. So it's like redo the whole studio, plywood first, sheetrock on top of that, and then you're good. It's like that's almost like a no-brainer. Almost all galleries have that. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about the process for doing the huge install at Sigma Jenkins? And you mentioned that was sort of a breaking point for you, and then you transitioned and took some time just to intake after that. Can you just talk about that process a little bit more?
Well, I think that as an artist, I mean, you're an artist, I know. I think that there's always a point. And I think I described them as I went along, meaning like, okay, you're no longer going to be doing this anymore. What you do is you strip away the things that become too familiar and too easy. If you need to keep yourself entertained. I mean, this idea of making, it's about okay, if I get a signature, my voice signature, and then it's like I'll put that out there and I can make a lot of loot, It's like, I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp of, it's like, how much time you got? The journey is short, So it's like, I say, okay, I want to go to China. I want to take tricolor glazing and try to see if I could push that in there, work those knuckleheads over there and see if we could merge these things. And it's like, so always thinking about, okay, the next, and it's always out of the box. It's never this straight line that because tricolor glazing and me, it's like, okay, so it's like, okay, how do I make that happen, And it's like, I can feel that it's possible, especially once, if you imagine the kind of history that's in that country, I mean, that's heavy stuff, long history, We're just children, So it's like, put your body in there, let it be a receiver of information, it's all good, So I'm for breaking points, so where you get to your transitional, it's like I'm down for that. It's like when you get too comfortable, just okay, next.
Hey, I'm just curious as to who some of your biggest influences are.
My biggest influences?
Yeah, people who influenced your work the most.
Well, wow, Jackson Pollock is probably the one because that was it was him that actually. When I saw his work, and it was in the black and white magazine in the library, and I was like, whoa, then black and white, Jackson Pollock, black and white. Imagine that. Still had his punch, So, I was making illustrations and copies of Norman Rockwell paintings and Maxwell Parrish, and it's like I saw that, and I was like, that is killer. This is art, And that was what? 14, 15 or something like that. And my beginnings are right there. Definitely did damage to the idea of having an easier life. It's like, art is like this, this is dimensional. It's like you want to travel to these dimensions, then you're going to have to bleed a little bit, right? So I saw that. Then the Picasso show came to MoMA. That was in like 79, 80 or something like that, and saw that. And then the cap was taken off. You know what I mean? It's like, you could do this. So I remember I went to DC Comics, and they were showing me that. At the time, there was a Superman movie that has just come out, and they were bragging about that. And they said, you got to come to us, because it's like, we got this movie, you know, and we're on the top. You don't want to work with Marvel. They didn't know that I had seen, you know, the Picasso exhibition. You know, so it's like, so I'm not going with any of you bums, you know. It's like, I'm just here, you know, because I'm a nice guy, and I said I'd come, you know. I want to see and check you out, you know. And it was like, you know, that's that story, you know. But those are the two situations. Definitely Jackson Pollock. You know, like, that's it. And then now it's like, I'm standing on the shoulders of a lot of artists. I mean, I'm not, you know, but my beginnings are right there. Yeah. Run.
So a lot of your works could be described as big walls of things. So I guess what kind of draws you to the idea of a horizontal surface with basically stuff stuck on it, I guess. I don't know, could you just sort of describe?
Yeah, I tell you that. There's always one in the crowd.
Why you're drawn to that.
I'll see you afterwards. Fighting words, yes. Yeah. What was the question? Yeah, why am I drawn to that?
Why that other than freestanding things?
Oh, okay, that's a question. Freestanding. Uh-huh.
Right on the wall, sort of like a relief.
Let me think. I'm thinking. That's a good question. Let me think about that. Yeah. Staying in the center. I definitely have done things, and there's a piece that's a giant monster tree that hasn't made it out of the studio that will be staying in the middle of the floor. But I think that I know that it has something to do with the traditions of painting. I'm actually a painter. I mean, if you were going to like say, oh, just like, you know, my beginnings were there. So I know about wall, you know what I mean? And so like I challenge painting by actually coming off the wall but not going the obvious route, which would have been sculpture, straight on 3D. That's a good answer. I like that. Yeah. You guys got to have more questions. Come on. You don't have to get up, honey. Go ahead.
I just wondered how you did the
That's how I did it.
Yeah, you got the board.
Sure.
How you did the wave you probably did by soaking.
Yeah, it's not that difficult, honey. No. No, listen. You know, you look at, there are all these different ways. Ingenuity is, there's a line there. How's it called? Ingenuity is the mother of invention, right? Something like that? Or is it, how's that go? Necessity. Yes. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Right, okay. Always going with that. Because if I were to do it the way you're suggesting, would have been a traditional way and most difficult, painstaking way of doing it. So I need to realize this thing. And what I found is that, listen, I was standing watching the ocean and realized that there's a rhythm that's there that could be translated into a material that's not water. And I said, how do I get there? So, you know, you can sit there and go, oh, well, like I could bend wood, like painstakingly do this and build it up like that and do this. And it's like, well, then it wouldn't have fluidity. So you have to attempt to mimic what and actually get on the idea of what it should feel like, not what it should look like. So what I did was I took flashing that you put on a roof. You know, you can bend that, no problem. It's like, it flows like water. Just about, you can do whatever, bend it this, like this, like this, like, okay, so I did that. I bent it and just reinforced it. So thin, you know, right on top. Now you guys go out and make your own Leonardo. The book is actually going to be, you're going to get all the secrets anyway. Just wait till March. That I won't tell you, but yes. But it's interesting. I get these magazines that do. They're focused on materials. Like they'll say, like they're the Wood magazine that did an interview just 2 days ago with American Craft. Before that, printers magazine. It's interesting because I'm not even thinking about any of those as sort of categories in terms of what I'm doing. So, okay, I'm going to make prints now. I'm going to do paper, this, and I'm looking actually to add to my vocabulary, and that means my vocabulary is in largesse the art vocabulary. So I know that there's been all these other bodies that have come before me. I'm standing on top of their shoulders. And the idea would be to sort of introduce something that is an additive to that history. So when these guys approach me, they say, okay, we want to write about, we do wood stuff and you do wood stuff. And we want to make sure that you're in the magazine. And it's like, I said, wow, that's interesting. That's like, that magazine has sort of obviously parked it. This is what we do. And we're one of us, I said, yes. It's like, and the print magazine or whatever, they say, oh, yes, we need you to come and do an interview, with the print fair in New York next week. And I said, yes, I can do that. And are you like a print maker? I said, yeah, but what I did with Paste Prints was very interesting. Now, I don't know if you guys know who these guys are, but Paste Prints, what they do is they ask artists to come in and work with their print department, which, you got like Chuck Close is the what you call it, poster child for that organization. And so you get artists from all over, me being one of them. And what we do is we go in and we create, they allow you they have different departments. They have the lithography department, etching department, have paper making department. And it's like you can choose, artists can come in and choose which department they're going to work with. So I ended up inevitably working with the paper making one, and we ended up actually changing the language of printmaking. Because I didn't go in as a traditional print, it's like, okay, that's what I'm talking about, being an additive. You have to go in and actually, I wasn't trying to do it. You just go in and do what's natural. You say like, okay, you want to make the ocean in your work? Then don't try to think, I'm going to make a piece, it's going to be a water piece. And that, because it's water, it's going to be, no, you'd say, I'm going to mimic, and I'm going to do what I do, and it's like, in the end, you end up adding to the overall language. So printmaking has now gone up because you weren't thinking traditionally. So when these guys approach me and say, come in, we're going to put you in the Wood magazine, the sculptor, I say, yes, put me in. It's all right, They parked it, I didn't park it, So it's like, but the only way you add to the language is you don't park it. Don't park it. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Leonardo. There's something so hypnotizing and just me wanting to touch your artwork. The texture, it's just the texture that really entices me to be very engaged with your work. And I'm curious to know what your experience is like playing with different materials. Some materials are much rougher, and others are much softer, like with the cotton.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, you obviously, I feel like you hurt yourself using these different types of
Never.
material. No cuts?
No cuts from
No
the
burn.
tetanus shots either. It's like, it's interesting, you talk about the touching aspect because people, I did a cotton piece, people couldn't stop touching it. And it's like, I said, wow, there's something about this material, But that was in the beginning, and now I'm seeing that that's with all these different materials that people want to do that. And there's something that I feel that there's, in the rhythm of the piece and of the works that will draw you in. They're sometimes physically put in because you know something about composition. You know that you have to have, you know, like in a sculpture, you got to have your cavities in order to sort of get the eye to travel into the piece. You know, pulls your body in. You know, and we can talk. Well, I was talking before about worlds within worlds. Can I do that? Can I point? I guess I can't get up there. I mean, I want to get to that piece up there, number 63. So let me get to that, because that actually demonstrates more. Thank you. There you go. There it is, there. 60. Oh, great. Okay. All right. So let's see. Like that. Now, that actually, we were talking before about dance and rhythm. Understanding what happens to the body, you know, when you push at you, and then actually, you know, like you breathing and exhaling, and, you know, so it's like this thing is alive, actually. It looks as though it's undulating, you know, it's moving. You know, you do that, you complete that action, actually, the viewer completes that action. I started, but you complete it. So this touching stuff that you're talking about, you do it with your eyes. A lot of times you want to do it with your hands, but if you're in museums, you can't do that. So in the end, it's like I do understand that you have to pay attention also to the details, you know, because these broad sweeps are great, but they don't mean anything if you don't, at least in my language, they don't mean anything unless you actually fill in the blanks, you know, like you fill in, you know, so that it becomes worlds within worlds. So I can actually take sections, and actually this piece, this one is all about that. Let's get to that one. It's got to be number 123. It's all about exactly that. Bits and pieces from past works that, you know, like, and each one has its own history. You know, each piece has its own history. Could have been a piece on its own. And people usually, when they go to the shows, they say, I want that one right there, you know. You know, it's like, and honestly, the way this all started, this piece started, was people were making visits to the studio, and they would say, you know, can I have that thing that's on the floor there? It's like a little remnant or something that fell off or whatever. And they say, oh, take that. And they would take it and they frame it. And then I would go, whoa, you know, it's like that. I don't remember, like, you know, you buying that thing or whatever. It's like, no, you gave that. It was a remnant on the floor, you know. It's like, you know, but it happens all the time with this piece in particular. Now, you do that actually with the other works too, but the fact is, this one actually has done it for you. It's separated those parts. So, like, you know, like they're, like I said, worlds within worlds, you know. Yeah. Now the,
So it's interesting. It's not really about layering.
mm-hmm.
Right? You only work by layering.
Oh, sure I do. Listen, if I'm taking works apart, that previous work had a life, right? Boom, on to the next one. There's another layer of life each time. There's a layer of life each time. I think they get stronger each time, just like you get stronger from experiences, right? So it's a layering of different experiences. In that way, and in art too. This art is life. It's like it does. It's not. There's no separation, you know.
Because it almost seems like you're adding materials that kind of next to each other. So
Yeah, but you're looking. If you were to say, if something was finished, imagine you had something that you said was finished, and then I had the opportunity to take an axe to it, right? To add it to something else. And layers, right? Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. Why do I take them apart? Because it's I think it's mutually beneficial to the artist and to the truth of the history of making art. No, it has nothing to do with not liking. There's a journey going on. So you want to be a participant in that journey. You want to be a live participant in that journey, right? So you actually have to commit and actually sacrifice certain things in order to get to the next place. I actually don't do it by way of like this piece is that and this piece is that. No, I take this piece to make this piece and make this piece to make the next piece. So look at that. It's like all these old works, you know what I mean, from previous, you know, like lives. You know, in the end, it's like you end up with a monster, a real monster, you know what I mean? And so like, but you have to give up something. I mean, if I could have just like sold off all those little parts and been a millionaire, you know what I mean? You know, but it's like then the language of art would have, would not be, I'm just a vehicle, a vessel. So it's like, so yeah. I want to be an additive to that, to the language though, right? So someone has to like make a decision to say like, oh, let's add to the language of art, let's commit to that, Life is just short, so it's like, that could be my part. Mm-hmm. So you did steal everything. Almost though.